What happens when a Hollywood titan walks into a trap set by a smug talk show host? Mark Wahlberg, the gritty action star known for his no-nonsense attitude, stepped onto Stephen's stage expecting a routine interview. Instead, he was ambushed, his career and character under attack. The tension was palpable from the first handshake, a grip too tight, a smile too sharp. Stephen, perched behind his desk like a vulture, had a glint in his eye that spelled trouble. The audience, packed into the New York studio, sensed the brewing storm, murmuring like static before a lightning strike. Mark, in a crisp black jacket, stood tall, jaw set, ready for battle, unaware of Stephen's deeper agenda. This wasn't about promoting Mark's latest gritty Boston cop blockbuster. Stephen had other plans. Ones that would drag Mark's past into the spotlight and ignite a clash that would reverberate across America. The show began with Stephen's signature smirk, his opening monologue peppered with jabs at Hollywood machismo. He didn't name Mark, but the barbs felt personal, each landing like a dart on the unseen guest backstage. When Mark strode out, the crowd roared, expecting charm and banter. Instead, Stephen leaned forward, voice dripping with condescension. "So, Mark, you've played a lot of tough guys. Is that because you're still trying to outrun that kid from Boston who got into trouble?" The question hit like a sucker punch. Mark's eyes narrowed, his smile vanishing. The audience gasped, sensing the shift. Stephen was referencing Mark's turbulent youth, arrests long buried under years of hard work and redemption. Mark leaned back, crossing his arms. "You want to talk about my past? Stephen, let's talk about yours. How's it feel to sit there judging people while hiding behind that desk?" The crowd oot, a mix of shock and delight. Stephen's face twitched, composure cracking for a split second. The tension thickened as Stephen doubled down. "I'm just saying, Mark, people change. Sure, but folks wonder if you're still that guy who threw punches in the street." It was a low blow, twisting Mark's past into a caricature. "You don't know me," Mark said, low and dangerous. "You read some old headlines and think you've got my story. I've worked my ass off to be where I am. What have you done besides sling cheap shots for laughs?" The audience erupted, some cheering Mark, others stunned by his venom. Stephen, unfazed, leaned closer, eyes gleaming. "Oh, come on, Mark, you're a star now, but let's not pretend you're a saint. Those headlines don't lie." Mark's fists clenched, knuckles whitening. He wasn't just defending his career, he was fighting for his dignity, for the man he had become, against a host determined to tear him down. The exchange grew uglier. Words became blades aimed at each other's throats. Stephen, relishing the chaos, pressed harder. "You talk about hard work, but isn't it true you got your big break because of who you knew, not what you did?" It was a calculated jab, meant to paint Mark as a fraud. Mark's face reddened, voice rising. "You're full of it, Stephen. I clawed my way up. No handouts. You want to talk connections? Look at yourself riding your network's coattails to this desk." The crowd was electric, hanging on every word. Stephen's smirk faltered, his insecurities prickling. He wasn't used to guests fighting back this hard. Mark, sensing the shift, stood up, towering over the desk. "You think you can drag me through the mud for ratings? I'm not your punching bag." The audience held its breath. The studio felt thick with the weight of their standoff. Stephen, cornered, had one last card, but Mark's defiance cast a shadow over his desk. Awe and unease rippled through the crowd. The air felt ready to ignite. Stephen, caught off guard, scrambled to regain control. "You're getting awfully defensive." "Did I?" Mark shot back. "Maybe. There's more truth to those old stories than you want to admit." The accusation hung heavy, implying Mark's past was still as present. The crowd murmured, some leaning forward, others shifting uncomfortably. Mark's eyes burned with fury, but he didn't sit. He stepped closer, voice steady, laced with menace. "You're trying to paint me as some thug who got lucky, but you're the one digging up dirt for claps like a cheap tabloid hack. What's your deal, Stephen? Jealous of people who actually fought for something?" Stephen's face flushed, his cool facade cracking under Mark's glare. He pushed back from the desk, standing to meet Mark, though his frame looked almost comical next to the actor's bulk. "Jealous? Please, Mark, I don't need to scrap in the streets to prove myself. I've got this show, millions watching, and I call it like I see it. You're the one who can't handle a little truth." The audience gasped. The tension had become a living thing, coiling around every word. Mark laughed, a harsh, bitter sound cutting through the room. "Truth? You wouldn't know truth if it slapped you. You're not calling it like you see it. You're fishing for drama, trying to make me look small so you can feel big." The crowd erupted, cheering for Mark, their loyalty shifting to the underdog who refused to be cowed. Stephen, sensing the audience slipping away, doubled down, voice rising to a near shout. "You want to talk about feeling big? Let's talk about your movies, Mark. All those cop roles playing the hero. Is that your way of rewriting history? Pretending you're the good guy now?" It was a vicious jab, questioning not just Mark's career, but his integrity. The crowd hushed, waiting for the explosion. Mark's jaw tightened, his hands flexing as if restraining himself. "You're pathetic, Stephen. You think you can sit there and psychoanalyze me? My movies are about real people, real struggles, something you'd never understand, sitting in your cushy studio, mocking folks who've actually lived. The words landed like blows. Stripping away Stephen's smug armor, the audience roared, some standing, their cheers fueling Mark's fire. The confrontation teetered on chaos. Stephen, desperate to reclaim the upper hand, leaned in, voice dripping with sarcasm. Real struggles. Come on, Mark, you're a multimillionaire playing dress. Spare us the working class hero act. It was a fatal misstep. Mark's eyes flashed, and he slammed a fist on the desk, the sound echoing like a gunshot. You don't get to talk about my life like it's a joke. I came from nothing, built everything, and I don't need some snide talk show host telling me who I am. The crowd was on its feet, cheers deafening as Stephen recoiled, confidence crumbling. For a moment, it seemed Mark might walk off, but he held his ground, staring Stephen down, daring him to push further. Stephen, rattled but unwilling to yield, opened his mouth, poised to fire back. His eyes darted, mind racing to salvage crumbling authority as the audience's cheers for Mark drowned the studio. He straightened, forcing a smirk, voice quivering with desperation. You're making a scene, Mark. Why so touchy? I'm afraid the world's going to see the real you, not the polished movie star. The jab was meant to sting, but it only fueled the fire. Mark stepped around the desk, closing the gap, presence looming like a storm cloud. The real me. I'm right here, Stephen, not hiding behind a script like you. You want to talk fear? Look in the mirror. You're terrified of losing this little kingdom you've got. The crowd roared louder, their energy crashing over Stephen's faltering defenses. A few hecklers shouted Mark's name, amplifying the chaos. Stephen cornered, abandoned subtlety, tone raw and vicious. Kingdom. I'm doing my job, Mark, asking the questions people want answered. Like why a guy with your rap sheet gets to play the hero while the rest of us deal with the mess you left behind. It was a reckless move, and the audience gasped, sensing blood in the water. Mark's face hardened, voice low and slicing. I paid my dues, owned my mistakes, and built a life you couldn't dream of. You're not asking questions for people. You're throwing punches because you know your show's nothing without someone like me to tear down. The crowd erupted again, some clapping, others shouting, the studio a pressure cooker ready to explode. Mark's words hit Stephen like a slap. For a moment, his mask slipped, revealing raw anger. He stepped forward, jabbing a finger. You think you're untouchable because you're a star. I've got news for you. People see through the act. They know you're still that punk from the streets, no matter how many movies you make. The insult was a grenade. The audience held its breath, waiting for Mark's response. He didn't flinch, eyes burning with controlled rage. You're done, Stephen. You don't get to rewrite my story to prop up your ego. I'm not here for your games. He turned to walk off, then paused, spinning back. Stephen, you want to know who I am? I'm the guy who doesn't need a desk to feel important. The crowd exploded, cheers shaking the studio as Mark's words landed like a knockout punch. Stephen, visibly shaken, tried one last gambit, voice shrill with desperation. Go ahead, walk off, Mark, prove you can't handle the heat. But Mark didn't budge. He leaned in close enough that Stephen flinched. I can handle anything you throw, but I'm not wasting my breath on a guy who's only brave behind a microphone. The audience was on its feet, roars deafening as the standoff reached its peak. Stephen's face twisted, confidence shattered, but he couldn't resist one final jabba, reckless move that would either bury Mark or seal his own humiliation. The tension was unbearable, the outcome hinging on Mark's next move. As the crowd waited for the explosion that would define the clash, the studio vibrated with their roars. A living pulse, as Mark stood inches from Stephen, gaze unyielding. Stephen, face a mask of barely contained panic, clung to his last shred of bravado. He leaned forward, voice a venomous hiss, loud enough for the microphones. You can play the tough guy all you want, Mark, but deep down you're still running from who you were. A thug in a fancy suit doesn't fool anyone. The words were a desperate swing, meant to shatter Mark's armor and reclaim the spotlight. The audience gasped, some booing Stephen. Loyalty had clearly shifted to Mark. The air felt electric, every eye locked on the two men, the clash teetering on the edge of something unforgettable. Mark's jaw clenched, but his response was calm, a low growl carrying more weight than any shout. You're out of moves, Stephen. You've been trying to break me since I walked out here, but all you've done is show everyone who you are, a small man tearing down anyone who's made something of themselves. The crowd erupted, cheers like thunder as Mark's words stripped Stephen bare. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His conviction was raw and undeniable. Stephen stumbled back a step, hands gripping the desk, eyes darting as if searching for an escape. You don't get it, do you? Mark continued, stepping closer, presence overwhelming. I'm not running from my past. I own it. I built my life brick by brick, and no smug talk show host is going to take that from me. The audience was on its feet. Applause a tidal wave, drowning out Stephen's attempt to interrupt. He tried to cut in, voice cracking. You're delusional, Mark. You think you're some kind of hero. You're just a Mark raised a hand, silencing him with a look that could stop a freight train. Save it. I'm done letting you twist my story for your cheap ratings. The crowd roared louder, some chanting Mark's name, their voices a chorus of defiance. Stephen's face twisted with fury and humiliation, his carefully crafted persona crumbling under Mark's resolve. For the first time, he had no comeback, no snide remark to hide behind. The studio felt like a battlefield, and Mark stood victorious. Unbowed and unbroken, Mark turned to the audience, voice steady but fierce. This guy wants to drag up old dirt, make you doubt me, but you know who I am. I'm the guy who fights, who falls, who gets back up, and I don't need his approval or anyone's to know what I've earned. The crowd exploded, cheers, shaking the walls, as Mark nodded, a gesture of gratitude and defiance. Stephen, deflated, sank into his chair, hands trembling. He opened his mouth, but no words came. The fight was over and he had lost. Mark, still standing, looked ready to walk off, eyes burning with a fire that promised one final statement, a parting shot that would cement his triumph and leave Stephen's ambush in ruins. The studio pulsed with the crowd's thunderous cheers, their voices a wall of sound, lifting Mark even taller. He stood, unwavering, eyes locked on Stephen, who slumped in his chair, swagger reduced to a flicker of defeat. The audience's chants of Mark, filled the air, a testament to the battle just fought. Stephen's attempt to tear Mark down had crumbled. The stage now belonged to Mark. He took a slow breath, voice steady, carrying the weight of a man who'd faced worse than a talk show ambush and come out stronger. You thought you could bury me, Stephen, he said, calm but cutting, each word landing like a hammer. But you forgot one thing. I don't break. I've been through tougher fights than this, and I'm still standing. The crowd roared louder, some stomping their feet, energy a tidal wave of support. Stephen's face was pale, hands fidgeting with a pen, eyes avoiding Mark. He tried to muster a response, voice weak. This is just, but the words fell flat, drowned by the audience's Mark shook his head, a faint, defiant smile breaking through. Nah, you made it personal. You wanted to drag me down for your moment in the sun, but this ain't about you. It's about everyone out there who's ever been counted out, and kept going. He turned to the audience, arms wide, connecting with them in a way Stephen never could. The crowd surged to their feet. Applause a deafening wave as Mark spoke directly. You don't need someone like him to tell you who you are. You fight, you build, you win. Stephen, now a shadow of his former self, could only watch as Mark owned the room. The host's attempt to reclaim control was gone. His questions exposed as petty jabs from a man desperate for relevance. Mark stepped back, point made, victory clear. I came here to talk about my work, my life, he said, voice low but resonant. But you wanted a circus. I'm done playing your game. With that, he turned and strode toward the edge of the stage, not in retreat, but in triumph, head held high. The audience erupted, their cheers following him like a hero's anthem. Stephen, left alone at his desk, forced a hollow smile for the cameras, defeat written in every line of his face. As Mark reached the wings, he paused, glancing back one last time. The crowd was still on its feet, their applause a roar that drowned out the show's theme music. He raised a hand, a final acknowledgement, not just of their support, but of his own resilience. He had walked into Stephen's trap and turned it into a moment of truth, proving he was more than the past Stephen had tried to weaponize. The audience knew it, and so did the millions watching at home. Mark Wahlberg hadn't just survived the clash. He emerged stronger, a man who'd faced the fire and walked away unbroken. The stage lights dimmed, but the energy lingered, a story of defiance and victory that would be remembered.